This is Mike Walter with MikeWalterMusic.com, and you're listening to the Let's Make a Record podcast.
I ain't got no mistletoe for you, but I waited outside all night until my lips turned blue.
A couple months ago, I made a record with a band called Among the Wolves. So today I've got two guys from that band, the lead guitarist, Jonah, and I've got the singer and founding member, Dawson. So we talk a little bit about where the band started, where they are now, maybe where they're going. We spent some time talking some songwriting philosophy, which is something I'm very into. I know in this podcast I really want to focus on the whole process from the creation of the song to pre-production, submitting it to your band and getting it arranged and orchestrated in a way that it sounds like, well, it sounds like your band. We talk a little bit about that. So in general, we just go through the whole process. I've enjoyed working with these guys, and it was a mad dash doing this record. I did an EP for them before, which was also a mad dash. We talk a little bit about that. But rather than talking about what we're going to talk about, how about we just talk to the guys? So here's Dawson and Jonah from Among the Wolves.
Merry Christmas.
All right, I've got the guys, at least two of the guys here from Among the Wolves. I've got Dawson.
What's up?
And I've got Jonah.
Hello.
So these guys made a record with me back in May. When was that released?
That came out August 27th, 20th, 25th.
25th.
Jonah knows what's up.
That's right.
And that was your first full length, and that was called what?
Between Home and Lost.
That was kind of a mad dash of a record, too. It was,
Yeah.
I had a temporary studio.
We had a temporary living situation in an RV.
We couldn't figure out how to get the heat working for the longest time in that thing.
We
Well, at
had to
least it
go
was in
buy
May, though.
blankets.
Yeah.
Well, it worked out. We really cranked that record out.
Oh, yeah.
It was intense. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the record, but one of the things I really want to focus on is who you guys are. It's only 2 of the 5, right? And you've had one member change since then.
Right.
And it hasn't been replaced yet.
Correct, yeah.
So, Dawson, you and I had done an EP
Right.
the end of 2012, right?
No,
Or no, that's
2015.
2015,
I think,
yeah. 2012. I'm really jumping.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you then. Yeah, and so that had a couple songs that were on the full length, and then we did them over again, and we did them better. I think personally, I think everything around it was good, but I think the record was more cohesive with everything. So,
For sure.
all right, cool. So let's who are you guys? I know you guys, but
Right.
I want to kind of introduce you to who else is maybe listening or may eventually listen to you guys or hopefully find you. And, hopefully by the end of the podcast, they'll have a little bit more of an idea of what's going on with the music. And when they listen, they can kind of engage more than just kind of rocking.
Right, yeah.
So who are you guys?
So I'm Dawson, and I'm the lead vocalist for Among the Wolves, one of the main songwriters in the band, and kind of the person who figureheaded the start of the band, got things rolling and got the group together.
I'm Jonah. I'm the lead guitarist, and also I dabble in a little bit of the songwriting process as well. I joined last year, like November, right? Yeah. Right. It was my first semester in college, and I met Dawson in a songwriting lab that we were doing. And at the time, I was like, I'm going to do metal all the way. There's no other option for me. And then, Dawson was just like, hey, want to join this band? I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. And so, I don't know, I guess my views on music changed and my genres just became broadened after that point. But yeah, that's how I got to be with Among the Wolves and what I do in it.
Yeah, you guys are both you're both guitar in my guitar studio at Indiana Wesleyan. So that's how I met you both.
Yeah.
But just let's where do we start? Just the beginnings of the band. It goes much further back than just this last year with you. So why don't you just
Yeah. I originally went to school in South Carolina, and that's kind of where this project started. Was at my school there with two other guys. We were trying to rock the three-piece thing, and I started writing some music and ended up having to transfer out of that school. And so then I was estranged from those guys, and it just didn't seem practical to keep trying to start something, getting it off its feet with that much distance between us. So I continued to write, and I was just determined to get something out. And eventually I ended up meeting Mike, and we recorded the EP together, put something out that was a great building block to get this group together, because now I was able to meet people, show them this EP, and say, I want you to be a part of this. What do you think? And that's really what helped get Jonah on board, get Chandler on board, and get Jesse on board. And Chandler actually was probably the second member of the band, even though he didn't officially join until after Jonah, because there was a gig we had in South Carolina that we needed somebody to fill in for guitar on, and I asked Chandler to play that gig, and he had been since that gig, he had kind of been an unofficial member of the band until we decided to just ask him to join full time.
Yeah, you had given me some of those songs, but you'd worked somewhere else and did some recordings. It just didn't turn out the way you wanted.
Yeah.
Wasn't quite what you were looking for, and since I'm a little more in your genre, I think, than the studio was. Even though I'm not sure if I'm really a pop punk person, but I like metal. Right?
That's right.
Metal. All right. No, I like folk music, but
Freaking nerd.
that's my kind of music. But yeah, you brought those songs to me, and I thought they were pretty cool. So I wanted to get hooked up with you and get that started. And I think it worked out well. That EP, you brought the songs. It was a weekend, wasn't it?
It was
like a Thursday night.
3 or 4 days, and I got there on like a Tuesday night. I think we did a little bit. We did a little bit of pre-pro on that night, and then just grinded out the songs.
That's because you and I wrote that. Well, we did that different the acoustic arrangement of A Well, which is very different than which was cool because I think you got to see how you could take the same song and turn it into something very different. Right. And you ended up doing that with a little bit with the Christmas tune, I think that you just released.
Yeah.
We did that, and I think I played all the guitars and bass. And you obviously did the vocals, and then I had my drummer that used to tour with me. He played drums on it. We ended up having to go back and retrack one of them because we had an issue with the snake we were using. I don't know what it was doing. It kept like flipping. It would like flip polarity right in the middle out of nowhere. I've never seen that in my life, but you could see it in the wave. It just would square off and like it just someone flipped a switch. It was crazy, and I tried to cover it up with some overhead stuff, and it just wouldn't work. So we ended up having to go back and retrack it. But they ended up sounding really cool. It sounded good, but it like you said, it gave you something to go, hey, this is a serious thing. Which when you're kind of a solo act, in this case you had a vision, but you didn't have the band to go with it. So you had to have something to show them, and I think it was good. I think it turned out, especially for the amount of time we put into it. We crushed it, man. And then anyway, you had some other songs. We did a little bit of pre-production, not as much as I would have normally liked to have done, but you were all over the place. Jonah's from Virginia.
Yep.
And you're from New York. Chandler's from New York. The
Jesse's
bass player,
from
Jesse's from
Minnesota.
Yeah, he's a drummer. And then the bass player you had was from Michigan. It was hard to get you in the same room. So for pre-pro, it was interesting. But most of those songs you had written. So between Home and Lost, you were probably primarily writer, and Jonah contributed, some arrangement things, and then turned it into what you guys ended up sounding like. Right. Which is after that record, I think you guys are starting to sound more. I think you're finding your sound more now, but which is cool. It's cool I like to see a band evolve and really kind of figure things out. Let's just talk about that. So pre-production, you guys came in and you blasted out a couple days.
Yeah.
And where was that at?
That was the pre-production we did, that was at school, and we
in the
just
band room, right?
Yeah, and the school band room was so loud in there.
It was very loud.
And we just got everyone to come down, and I think it was the week before we went on tour, and we just grinded it out as much as we could and got ready for tour and got ready for studio.
Yeah.
And after that, we just took off for a month.
Yeah.
Right at that pre-production time, like it seemed like it just went like that. It was nonstop, just go, go, go.
It was
Well, you
exhausting.
Yeah, you guys, Dawson had told me that everybody's coming down, and I think you kind of asked me how I would go about doing it, and I think you did it. It's like crushing for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I'd actually talked a little bit about when I interviewed Daniel from Nomad, because they came in right after you guys the one day, and that's actually how I met them.
Right.
It was 'cause you had gotten done grinding it out for 8 hours, and then they moved in, and then they did some rehearsal time too. So it was a long day, but it was hard to hear in that room because one, it was pre-production. You'd already written the songs, and Jonah had some demos, and he was listening, kind of figuring out some guitar parts. But what made it really difficult, and I guess for any podcast listener, when you're doing pre-pro in a room that's very live, very large, in this case, it was the band rehearsal room at Indiana Wesleyan, and it's a huge room.
Yeah.
So if you can, it's really good to maybe record, put close mics on some things. You don't necessarily need to record the drums because you're going to pick it up. But close mic, a few things. That way, when you go back and listen to the recording, you can really hear what's happening, which is something I couldn't do with you guys, but I think it worked out fine anyway. But we've been doing some pre-pro and some demoing and songwriting kind of stuff in this room, which is very small. It's very isolated. And I think we can hear things a lot easier.
It's really nice.
You can test out parts a little easier. So, part of the idea with this podcast too is talking about pre-production. Essentially, I showed up the day that you guys were there, and I kind of wandered around, and I had earplugs in because, it was crushing loud. But I wandered around, kind of listened to some things. We worked on everything from guitar tones to when you hit the bass, hit it like you mean it. Just stuff like that. I think it was more really just prepping you guys to hit the road. Yeah. It wasn't really, I almost wouldn't even call that pre-production. It just gave me an idea what the song sounded like. Because I knew the 3 songs.
Right.
And then from the EP, but then I didn't know any of the other songs. So that helped me know, okay, when they come in here in a month, then I know what to expect. There were a couple things that I think I suggested. There was one, like in My Addiction, I think we changed a few things around, but I think that's the only song. Instead of...
We did on I'm All Right, we changed the last part to a... Didn't we added a breakdown or a halftime feel, didn't we? On I'm All Right?
Yeah, at the end of I'm All Right, we added the halftime chorus.
And just change it up a little bit.
And then we changed something on My Addiction, because that song was originally called Greatest Addiction.
Yeah.
And I don't remember
too many. It was that punk rock shows is my greatest addiction. I think that phrase just had so many words. But then by changing it to what it is now, so what people can hear on the record now is punk rock is my addiction. It's definitely more anthemic. Yeah. And it falls out of the mouth easier. It rolls off the tongue easier. Yeah. And it's definitely something you could shout.
Yep.
Whereas da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, or trying to get all the words.
Playing rock
shows is my greatest
addiction. Yeah.
Now that you've got a consistent lineup of very different influences, I think now the songs you're finding a genre, you're finding a sound. I think, maybe we could talk a little bit about it. The pre-pro, it was what it was. I showed up and I listened and I took some notes and suggested, and you guys tried it out. And then that's what ended up showing up in the studio. Although the guitar solos in the studio, we'll talk about that later, because I want you to give your perspective on that, because you had some ideas and you went out and played.
Sure.
But then when we got in the studio, you really was like, okay, now I can hear what I'm doing. Yeah. And let's make it sound, a little cool. And you wrote some really, really sick little lead lines that are like the one in the beginning of My Addiction is the one that I get stuck in my head. Anyway, so you guys are figuring out your set. For me, I think you guys have kind of an alt rock thing going on. Yeah. But you're more rock and roll to me. You sound rock and roll.
With the newer stuff, especially.
Yeah,
I think.
it's rock and roll. It's there's some punk in it. I think when we left, it was a Saturday when you guys left at the end of the week when we were doing your record. I think we were all kind of sitting there thinking, man, this sounds kind of skate punk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not so much pop punk, but kind of skate punk. And I know I like that raw sound, and I thought it sounded good with you guys.
Yeah.
But it worked out. I don't know. What do you guys? Are you feeling the same way with it? Or
Yeah, I definitely think Between Home and Lost had a very strong skate punk vibe. I'm not entirely sure where I would put the new stuff we've been demoing. It's still very close to the sound that was on Between Home and Lost, but it's not skate punk anymore for sure.
I think we're definitely branching, like outside, not necessarily outside the pop punk genre, but just a different side of it. Maybe we have hints of hardcore and hints but it's not all hardcore.
Yeah. Well, the thing I like what we've been doing recently is that, especially the song, the one we just did the other day.
Oh, No Home, No Problem.
Yeah, that new tune. It's got a little bit of a '90s hardcore,
Yeah,
and I think that's cool. And I think that's coming back. That kind of sound is coming back. Maybe the over-processed, super over tight thing. I think maybe people are, wanting a little more loose sound. I don't know. I personally do. There's nothing wrong with the I guess I could call it hyper tight, but I like a little bit of loosey goosey, I guess, in the sound and washiness, and I think it sounds cool. So how's the record been received thus far?
It was really great. I think this is a common thing by now. The buzz about it's kind of died down, but when it came out, we were averaging, I think, 200 listeners a day or more. I think the album got around 10,000 streams in its first month, which, I mean, it's not groundbreaking, but for a first full release, that's
and you guys are literally a new band.
Yeah, exactly.
And you didn't have the touring or anything else backing up, so I don't even know if those numbers are good, or I would, to me, I would think, well, that's good. But,
yeah, it was very encouraging.
It's good to.
And not just the numbers, but the people that we talked to were all very positive about what we put out. They liked all the songs.
Well, speaking of that, the people having a positive response to your music, let's maybe get a little bit of the songwriting and philosophy behind what maybe more so you were thinking, but now that we're moving forward and Jonah's in the band and he's writing, what is it that you guys are doing?
Right. I think the message that Among the Wolves has in all of our music, and you can hear it carry over in everything, is that mental illness is a very prevalent thing that our society faces, and we kind of want to try to normalize talking about it in our music and say that these are real struggles, and it's okay to admit that you're having these challenges in your life, and it's okay to get help with that, because the fact is it's a normal thing. 1 in 5 people have a mental illness. And so that's the message that we bring with all of our music, and so we look for opportunities to share that wherever we can, and we inject that into all of our music. And especially being in the punk and hardcore scene, it's a very dark, angry, angsty scene, and so we try to write music that's positive and that brings hope to people, so that kind of helps us stand out in that crowd.
So I mean, along those lines, then maybe expound on how that, obviously in the live performance and in your interaction with people outside off the stage, that kind of passion flows over into what you do. But as far as in the lyric and that kind of stuff, just expound on how that's translated. Maybe even just go through one song at a time and just kind of, where did the song come from?
Yeah.
Now, you told me a couple interesting stories, and I think it would be really cool for people to hear your experience as to, where'd that song come from?
Right. I think Runaway's probably probably one of our most not famous, but popular songs, if not our most popular song. And the whole idea of that song is I personally struggle with bipolar disorder and general anxiety. And I wrote that song in a point in my life where I was just completely overwhelmed and my mind was basically killing me. And the lyrics in that song, especially in the intro, was me just writing down what I wish I would be, like what I wish somebody would say to me at that time in my life. And so I was writing the song essentially to myself, hoping for somebody to come and say, hey, you don't have to stay in this place. Let's run away. Let's find the solution to this problem and find a way to live a meaningful and happy life. And after I'd gotten out of that phase, I went back to the lyrics and I looked at them. I was like, wow, these are really bad, but there's a good message in there. So I took it and reworked it and ended up with Runaway. And that song's just a letter to anybody who's struggling. And it's the words that I wish I had heard, and I'm sure so many other people are aching for somebody to say to them. What's another good one?
Yeah, I don't know. In that song too, I know in the last two podcasts I've talked about having enough ambiguity in the lyric that people are able to insert themselves into the song. You're not giving so many details about I'm dealing with this on this date of the year, mommy, daddy had cancer kind of thing. Well, it's like, well, not everybody has that, but you're taking an emotion and putting it into the song and word, and there's enough space for everybody else to fit into that. And I think that's really good writing. Right. And two, I feel like I can get into the song, and again, I can interpret it in a different way. Right. With me, Runaway means it has a little different meaning. Sure. Obviously, but that's so cool because the song becomes mine.
I think Set Me Free has a really nice vibe to that same idea.
Yeah, that one, similar vibe. I wrote that one more as a prayer between me and God, just begging for release from the pain I was in. I wrote that in that same time period in my life, and Set Me Free was definitely more of a prayer, just begging for deliverance and reflecting on the choices that I had made that got me to that place. And so I think that it's just that humbling moment of saying, can't do this on my own. I need somebody to come and set me free from this.
Anything else? I mean, you got a lot of songs.
Yeah. A little more lighthearted one. Time Will Tell is a wacky scenario.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably think it's a love song, and I mean, it's written to sound that way, but it's more about this friend that I had who they'd been kind of just a really demanding friend, took up a lot of time, and were the kind of person expecting me to answer to every beck and call, which I don't mind doing for friends, but they started dating this dude and just completely dropped me off the face of the earth, which made me kind of annoyed and pretty angry. But the thing that got me was that they started dating this ex-convict who was in a halfway house. And so I'm just like, wow, okay.
That's punk rock.
Yeah. So I looked at this opportunity, and as frustrated as I was, I couldn't help but laugh at how just absurd the scenario was. I'm like, man, I gotta put this in a song. People are gonna get a kick out of this.
That song is Time Will Tell, by the way.
Yeah, Time Will Tell.
You and I had a conversation about it's the final track on Between Home and Lost, the acoustic.
Oh, All I Am.
All I Am. Why don't you?
Yeah. So I think the kind of the peak of my struggles with mental illness was at a point where I had attempted suicide, and I ended up being hospitalized in a psychiatric facility to get help. And I was in that place. They didn't allow us to have instruments or anything like that. And I had this song in my head, and I spent a lot of that time in prayer and in meditation, just looking for what I needed to do to get better. The lyrics to that song just kept building over the time that I was in that hospital in my head, and I could hear the song in my head. And that whole time I was there, I spent writing that song and writing my story of recovery. And I think that song is really what helped me recover and what helped me kickstart my life again and start doing something meaningful with my life. And so the song starts by, in the first chorus, saying, "All I am is a broken man. My dreams are lost in the sand. I'm burning like a candle. Hold me up till I burn out. I'm ready to come home tonight." And so it starts with how I was feeling when I first got sent there, saying that I'm broken and I've got nothing. God, take me home, take me to heaven. I'm ready to just leave this earth because I'm in so much pain. And at the end of the song, after I start saying, you know, I realize that my dreams are my legacy and what I can leave behind. And I changed the chorus there to, "All I am is a broken man, but my dreams are what I'm standing for, and I'm not ready to come home tonight." And it's that point where I realize, you know, there's a lot of pain in this world. There's a lot of pain in my heart, but I can still make something meaningful out of this, and I can still change other people's lives and give them hope through my struggles.
Which then that translates kind of into the mission statement of the band.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you've been coming in and writing some new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's talk a little bit about that. And then maybe we'll, at this point, I think we'll have to do a part 2.
Okay.
And then, you know, part 2, maybe we'll focus on actually, you know, what we did when we were making a record.
Sure.
But you can't really make a record until you write the songs.
Right.
And you know, what goes into it. And, you know, maybe let's talk a little bit about what we're writing now, what you guys are writing. I've been kind of involved, but, and what goes in actually into that. So what's going through Dawson's head? What's going through Jonah's head? What's going through actually the most recent one that we were working on? It was kind of Chandler's idea.
He did the music, yeah.
So what goes through your guys' head? What are we writing now? Where are you going next? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I guess we can start with the No Home, No Problem, since that was our most recent thing we were working on. Chandler came in and he had the chord outline and the feel of the song written. He had written the rhythm guitar part more or less. And so came in, and as he was tracking that, I was just sitting in the back listening to it and trying to pick out melodies in my head. And I asked him what the name was, and he told me the name was No Home, No Worries. And I instantly got in my head, "No home, no problem, baby." And I was like, boom. And that was kind of the trigger for the rest of the song. And so for me, when I write a song or when I write a melody, I usually start with a hook of some sort. Just whatever comes to my mind, and I just focus on that, sing it in my head, sing it aloud, play around with it until I get the next line. And after that, it just starts to flow and come together. And I just try to communicate something and hold on to something that's universal whenever I'm writing, and build the lyrics around that idea.
So I understand what you're saying, but when you say when you're trying to hold on to something and maybe write something that's universal, maybe expand on what that actually means to you, so other people can kind of.
So back to No Home, No Problems. It's about, that song's about being on the open road and being an adventurer. And so the universal idea behind that is the desire to adventure, the desire to experience life. That's something that everyone has. And I want every lyric in that song to be rooted in that and to be able to trace back to that feeling. And so when I write, I pick something that's a feeling that everyone can relate to. And I try to make lyrics that can always be traced back to that core idea. So with Runaway, it's wanting to find a safe place to feel happy and secure. That's something that everyone can relate to, because everyone wants security, everyone wants happiness. And so as I'm writing the song, I make sure that all the lyrics tie into that again in some way, and it makes the song feel much more cohesive.
Yeah. Now, both of you guys are actually songwriting majors.
Right.
So how does that play into things? What does that do for you? How does that inform you? How does it help you make decisions? As we're talking, again, we're talking about what we're doing right now, as opposed to, before. How has that changed things? How does that influence how you write?
I think for me, the biggest impact that the songwriting majors had on me is being able to hear other people's approaches to writing music, and being able to hear the things that stick out to them in my writing. Because I'm never going to notice all the flaws in my writing style. And so to be surrounded by other people who look at it and go, oh, that doesn't quite work, I start to be able to pick up on the bad habits I've developed and being able to correct them.
I think my biggest thing was being able to look at my own song and realize that there are problems and that I shouldn't be afraid to change them. You know, like I have, like if I have a song and it's like my baby now, and but I've like written this song, maybe lyrics, or just instrumental otherwise.
But it's helped you. It sounds like it's helped both of you guys from a critique standpoint.
Oh yeah.
So you're in an open forum essentially. I was in one of the classes. I think I was talking about music business. It was a Tuesday night, but it's not necessarily just one-on-one with Todd Siswerda. It's also in a group. So you guys are hearing everything, and you're in a place where you can kind of point out, yeah, that's kind of a mouthful, or why did I don't know if that melody thing that the little melisma you're doing there really works, and maybe go down, or that note doesn't really resonate with that chord. That kind of stuff. I think that's helpful. I mean, for me, I think that would probably be the most helpful thing. See, I wasn't a songwriting major, so I just kind of had to learn it by listening. And then hearing. See, my feedback was people not buying records or saying, "Oh, I didn't like that song" or whatever. But I'm an arranger. I had a natural. I listen to a lot of music. I am a musician. I play a lot of instruments, and I do write songs. But I think for me, it was listening to the people that I really like, and then going, "Oh, well, that doesn't sound like that. Well, why?" And then figuring out, it was really phrasing. I think phrasing is the big thing for me, and arrangement, which is something that Jonah's really, really good at. That we've been learning. Jonah's a monster arranger, which is very helpful. So instead of just kind of throwing things on the page, or in this case, we're throwing it up on Pro Tools. You're able to, no, cut that out. No, do this. And actually, a lot of the stuff, even though Jesse is your drummer, recently, Jonah's been doing a lot of the drum stuff and arranging it in a way to really make the song feel good. There's been a couple times where I'm like, oh my gosh, where'd you come up with it? That's incredible. I'm like, that just sounds so good. It sounds so right. What are we working on now? What are we doing now? We did the Christmas tune. We haven't really talked about that.
Oh yeah.
But the Christmas tune, you guys had an arrangement and a song written, and we kind of
it started out as an acoustic song, which is what we recorded first. Dawson, I remember I was sitting in Dawson's dorm room, and he was like, we should make a Christmas song because that's pretty punk. And so we decided to name it Christmas Song, because why would we name it anything else? And he started having these we wanted to do a song in a 6/8 time. Just, it's a different feel than what we've done before. And so he had an idea for like a da, 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 like, I don't know. He came up with a melody of some sort. And so I just started laying down some chords. He started writing words. And like, just like that, we were kind of like, wow, this really works, you know? And so we just kept expounding on that. And eventually the hook in the intro, the ba ba da 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 ba da da da, that just kind of came when I was playing the chords, you know, just a suspension coming out. But it's the process of like just playing around while you're writing that really is where you get your best ideas. It's not formulating like, all right, we have to, if we're on a 5 chord, we should have a deceptive cadence here. It's more like, does that feel cool? You know, it's
it's got to feel cool.
You gotta goof around while you're writing, because that's how you get the best stuff. Like Jonah sent me a demo of a song over the summer that we're gonna be recording later, probably in the new year, and he had a verse and a chorus written, and we're trying to we sat down, tweaked the song a little bit, and we're trying to come up with a second verse. And I was just completely joking around and just spewed what is now the second verse as a joke entirely. But then Jonah's like, no, write that down. That was actually good.
Yeah. That was a good time.
So I think...
You'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't heard it yet. You guys haven't brought it in yet. So the Christmas tune was cool. It's not just, I think around Christmas time, the new thing is for marketing reasons is to, you know, it's Christmas. People want Christmas stuff. So put it out, and you've got a month to market it, because once you have the new year, you're done.
Yep.
And I know I had suggested that let's do a Christmas song. And then you're like, oh, we already had an idea. And And you told me it was an original, so I actually thought you guys were going to come in. It was going to be a cheese fest, but the song slams.
Yeah.
It just totally. It's so good. And then there's the acoustic version as well. But
Get it free at our website, atwolves.com.
Yeah, there we go. And but the bridge was kind of cool. We were sitting here, Jonah was figuring out some lead stuff, and I was like, man, this needs Carol the Bells.
Yeah.
And then so Jonah, and I don't know that this is really a testament to my teaching ability, but Jonah was able to just sit there and play it, figure it out really fast, and then harmonize it. Or no, you're moving it harmonically. You're moving it around,
changing it based on the chord that was being played.
And he did it. Well, it took us like 2 takes or something, and 2 or 3 takes. Yeah, it was pretty sick. But that's really cool. So there's your Christmas, a little bit of a Christmas, a traditional
adds
reference.
a different layer, and then that same Carol of the Bells comes back at the end for the intro part.
But it's major.
But it's major.
Yeah. So, can maybe go back to the songwriting thing, because I was listening to Rick Beato, and he went off on one of his tangents that are a lot of fun sometimes. But he was talking about the importance of tonal harmony. Now, obviously, I'm a music professor, so I'm an advocate of, since I've taken, this is the theory that you take as a freshman music major. Well, not just a freshman, but an undergrad music major. That would be more accurate. And it's tonal harmony. It even says it on the book, tonal harmony.
Yeah.
It's I don't even know who wrote it. Payne. So anyway, it doesn't matter. How does Kostka Payne?
I was going to say it fits the subject matter.
Well, you guys are in the thick of it. I've already taken it and dealt with it and realized how much I hated it. I used to sit out in the parking lot. I would drive in, and it was the second semester of it. I remember failing very particularly. I remember failing. I would sit out in the parking lot because it was too cold to get out of my car and walk into the building. So I'd sit in my warm car and it failed the class. It's stupid. But for you guys, I know what Rick Beato said, and I know other people can go and kind of find and hear what he said. How does that tonal harmony, having an idea of how counterpoint and that kind of stuff, how does that impact maybe how you look at arranging and how you write your songs now? Because I think when you guys come in, most of your songs they're done.
Right.
They're arranged. And there's not a lot of little movement things. And maybe every once in a while a little melody note, and you go, oh yeah, why didn't I,
Yeah.
Because that's the chord. So how does maybe your music degree stuff play into this, your training and theory? And
I think it's not so much the fact that I'm using the theory mentally. Like, I'm not thinking about how the chords actually move, like what they teach you, like 3 goes to 6, that kind of stuff. But more like I've heard all of these things played in all of my theory classes, all of my ear training classes, and I kind of understand what works and what doesn't now. I'm not saying I'm a master, like, not at all. I'm just past theory 2, and I still have a long way to go, but it's like I'm starting to understand why stuff works, and then incorporating that into different things that I haven't heard before. But then once I do that, understand, yes, that does work, or no, don't ever do that again. That kind of stuff.
do you think it makes you work faster, or do you think it was kind of it's not really important? How useful is it, I guess?
Yeah. I'd say ear training is pretty useful, right? For
Which
what
is
I'm
the one
doing.
that everybody really hates.
Yeah. I actually didn't mind ear training, but
Says the kid with perfect pitch.
all right. Anyway, I think for what we're doing with Among the Wolves, it's not as important. I want to get into, like composing for movie scores and video game scores and stuff like that. But I think it's mainly just gaining the ear for the music is what's really important, not so much understanding the actual theory behind everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, punk music, pop punk, rock and roll.
16451, baby.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty straightforward, and I think for me, I don't really think theoretically when I'm writing. I think the only time that I really start thinking the theory is in the post-writing stages where we're looking at the song and trying to figure out what's off about it. And that's when you kind of go through with your music theory lens and say, oh, that's why that part doesn't work, because of this. And you can just go through and see what's causing the issue because you understand how music works on a fundamental level.
Yeah.
I think also for lead lines, just because I have more experience with that than anything else, it's like if I know the chord that's being played over top. I know what goes over top of that to make it sound good, and I can change that based on what Dawson's doing on the melody, what Chandler does when he changes the chords. You know, where can I go that's smooth from there, and so stuff like that.
I think it's. I mean, I'm. You know, I think the theory is important. I didn't think it was so important when I was doing my undergrad degree, but before that, I was into, like, I call it guitar theory, which is like the guitar grammar series stuff, where it's, you know, it's all in blocks. And I think I've given maybe you some of that stuff, but it's talking about the modes, and I think that stuff is really good to know. I'm not anti-mode. I'm not anti-learning scales. But I think there's a better way. I know the method that I've been using with at least the Guitar Studio, which would include you guys, too, is you know, learn the fretboard all over the place. Have a progression, whether it's like, you know, minor 2, and then doing like a flat major 2, and then to, you know, which would be a tritone sub at that point, and then doing like a 1 chord, just going from 2 1 2 1, or even 2 5 1, or just hanging on 1.
Yeah.
And then, like in the case if we're in G, just play a G major 7, just let that run on repeat, and then just play G scale all over the fretboard everywhere. It doesn't have to be in time, doesn't have to be in rhythm even. Just kind of let it unwind, and then speed it up. Then start playing little riffs and licks and sliding into your 7, you know, sliding into the 3 and that kind of stuff. And I think that I personally think that's a better way to learn how to use the scale. It's not maybe the best way to learn the scale, but it's the best way to learn how to use it, especially on the fretboard, because guitar players, you know, on a piano, a C looks like a C all the way up and down the keyboard. But for us, it's like, well, I can play here, this position, whatever. So I think it helps with learning the fretboard. And I know you've done some of that, because when you come into the studio, then you're able to just do things. And I'm like, well, okay, it's working. He knows where that note is, which is really interesting too. When you guys come in, I could say, play that C, and you play the C, and you don't go, you know, it's the 7, you know, don't play that fret. It's the fret. I could, no, which is really cool, because with you guys, even though you're a punk band,
Right.
I mean, I'm going to totally expose you and give you
Busted.
totally discredit you as a punk band, but you guys actually know music theory. You know what you're doing. You guys can pick up the instrument and you know, I can play this. This is 4 chord. This is a whatever. This is secondary dominant. You know, know that stuff, which is really cool, because we can use that language. It's not so much, no, just do this fret and then this fret and then, you know, and then, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but I do appreciate the fact that I can speak a musical language with you. Right. That's, you know, well,
there's a lot less confusion.
There's a lot less confusion, yeah. And I personally think it's important for pre-production, working in the studio, knowing music theory. Now, I know we sitting here probably know a lot more music theory than most people that are going in and doing records, or producers that are doing records. Is it really that important? No, I think again, I think you pointed it out too. It's does it feel right? I could feel it there. It sounds good. Yeah. And I think that's really, in the end, all that matters if you're, you know, especially in this genre, rock and roll and that kind of stuff. So what else are we working on? What else we got coming out?
There's a couple songs that we're working on. There's one that I wrote that's kind of been on the back burner for a while. There's the song that Jonah wrote, and Jonah mentioned earlier that he's got another song, or like a hook, that he wants to show us. There's Chandler's song. I mean, we're always just writing new stuff, playing with new ideas, right? And then pretty soon, in the next couple weeks, probably, we're going to start working on our booking for the summer tour, which will be heaps of fun.
Heaps of fun. Now, where are you going? What are your projected dates for that?
We're planning to do 3 months, all of May, all of June, and all of July. And
all of May?
Yeah.
Okay. And then coming back in August.
That way, you know, since we're still in school, want to give the guys some time to spend with their family before we go back to school and are estranged from them once again.
Yeah.
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 Estranged.
So,
It's a good word.
what are we, maybe we can talk a little bit of, this is part of the record making process, the releasing part. You're working through CD Baby.
Yep.
You're not signed, which isn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in the future that would be, something that you guys could do, but you want to get to the point where you actually have some leveraging
Right.
that you can do, which will be great. Rottweiler Records released your Christmas tune.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Sean Browning from Grave Robber. So he did that for you guys. But what are we looking into a new album coming in the future? You guys thinking about maybe just doing EPs, doing singles? What's kind of your plan in the new music era, I guess?
Yeah, I think from what I've observed and learned with the couple releases we've done is that a release is going to generate roughly the same amount of hype no matter how many songs are on it. And so because we're running things on a shoestring, I think that the best use of our resources is just to have singles released periodically throughout the year so that we're constantly generating a stream of hype instead of just dropping like a big fat bomb on people and then having nothing for a long time. And it gives us something to engage people with more frequently. So for the near future, at least, we're going to be primarily doing singles and maybe an EP here or there.
Okay. Because I know it seems like the way the market runs now, it could take 2 years for an album to like finally hit.
Right.
And that, when I say that, I mean after it's been released, which seems to be the trend.
Right.
So what are you guys doing to continue to market and maintain interest in that back catalog? Well, now your back catalog, which is what was released in June or July.
Yeah.
Which is your current album. What are
Yeah.
you guys doing? What are you doing on your end, social media? What's going on, and how are you promoting?
Yeah, that's something we're still working on figuring out. For the most part, we're just trying to have a solid social media presence. And whenever there's something that we can update people on, updating them on that, to create and build this personality for the band that people can attach to. Because I feel like with bands, as much as you're marketing your music and your product, I think you also have to market the personality, because that's what people are going to really cling to. And if people support the personality of the band as an entity, I feel like we'll be able to push our music much more effectively. And it'll be much more impactful when we do release it.
Do you think that like your music means something, but the band also stands for something? Do you think that helps you? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think it does. Just with conversations that I've had with people at shows, people are really impacted by the fact that we're not just playing music for the sake of playing music, but that we have something to say, we have a message to communicate with people, and it's something that's meaningful. I think there's a lot of music out there right now that's just kind of blah. It's not.
It's just music for music's sake.
Exactly. It doesn't have any sort of strong convictions to it. And I think that there's something just different that you can hear when music is being created for a purpose.
Yeah.
And I think that people really connect with that.
Definitely. I would agree with that. I will say, maybe we can end this part of it with the fact that there's 3 records this year that came out that I just love. And one of them was yours. And it's funny, I talked to Daniel from Nomad about this. If someone asked me what bands were my favorite bands, and I was like, actually, you know what? The funny thing is, it's the ones that I was working with. I was like, I loved that Nomad EP that came out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I loved your guys' record. There was enough serious and enough kind of campiness to it. And it was fun music, and it was hard hitting. And then Righteous Vendetta's record that came out. Those 3 have been that's been on repeat for me. I really appreciate the music that you guys wrote, and I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to work with you.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. Well, before we end this particular podcast, why don't you tell us where we can find you, social medias, and
Sure.
and that kind of stuff.
You can find us on Instagram at ATW Band, Facebook.com/ATW Wolfpack, and our website is atwolves.com. And then we're on Instagram. We're on Instagram. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, all the sort of stuff. So
Cool. Sounds good.
Merry Christmas, will it be one week?